Hello and welcome to Mel Make Stuff. My name is Melissa and this is episode number 7. It has been a little while since I have talked to you, and you would think that I just took a break for the summer, but what actually happened is that I sprained my wrist and was unable to knit for close to 6 weeks. So during that time that I had this sprained wrist, I couldn't knit, I couldn't sew, I couldn't write with a pen with my right hand, which is my dominant hand. And I also couldn't even pull my pants up on my own. There were a lot of stretch pants and big tent dresses going on for a while there. But luckily I am on the mend after MRIs and many weeks of PT and blah, blah, blah. I'm at the point where I can knit again, so praise be. To any new viewers, welcome. I am so glad that you're here. And to anybody who's been with me for a while, thank you so much for coming back and for sticking with me while I'm randomly not here for 3 months. I really appreciate that. I have a lot to show you today, so let me get all of my stuff organized and get started. I had been working on a number of different projects before I had this situation happen with my wrist, so some of them haven't gotten work in some time, but I'm gearing back up to pick them up again and get going, because I'd like to really finish a lot of these by the end of the year if possible. And of course I have a new cast on in the last 5 days, which is a Christmas gift knit. So I'm actually getting started on that a little bit earlier than I usually do. I'm like the queen of extreme last minute gift knitting, but this is a garment, so I can't screw around too much with the timing. And I also didn't want to put too much strain on my wrist trying to do it at the last minute. So I will show you that. I will show you a couple of my other works in progress, and I also have 2 finished objects. Actually, I have 3 finished objects. So the first one I am wearing, and this is the Blueberry Pie sweater by Johanna Kunin, who also goes by Softpower Knits. I think that's her Instagram name. This was a test knit. I've talked about this in the last episode, and I used some stash yarn for this that was really not what the yarn was that was called for in the pattern, but I really like the effect that I got with this yarn for my stash. For this sweater, I held together some Blue Sky alpacas, alpaca silk, which is a sport weight, and the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the Bordeaux colorway. And it created this really interesting fabric, which I talked about in the last episode also. And I'm going to put some video over while I'm talking so that you can see what this looks like when I'm standing up and moving around. I made the size medium, which I think is a 42-inch bust, and my actual bust measurement is 35. So I am wearing this with about 7 inches of positive ease. With that amount of ease, you can see that this is a nice loose sweater. The neckline is not too tight on me. That I think partially has to do with my yarn choices, because both of the yarns that I used alone and also in combination are very drapey. So the neckline is a little bit more open on me, which I like. I changed the sleeves a little bit, which I'll talk about in a moment. And I also made this a little bit cropped. I honestly don't remember what the pattern called for in terms of length, but I just stopped where I knew it would hit me in a flattering spot. I don't like sweaters to be too long, especially when I'm wearing them with positive ease like this, then they can start to look a little dumpy on me. I'm also short, so I tend to crop sweaters a little bit. I've managed to wear this a couple of times already, and I really enjoy wearing it. It is very warm. Alpaca and silk and mohair are all pretty warm materials, so this is one that is going to be great for fall and winter. The pattern was extremely well written, as I've talked about before, even during the test knit phase, which, sometimes you do a test knit and the pattern is really not ready to be test knit, and that's not a great situation, but this was not that. This was almost ready to go, I would say. And she has since published it, so you can get this pattern on Ravelry, and I believe she has it on PayHip and probably a couple of other places. So what did I change? I moved the sleeves a little bit forward on the yoke, and so you can't even really tell. There's basically no difference how this looks versus how the pattern as written looks, but because my shoulders slope forward on my body, I don't know if you're really going to be able to get a good sense of this, but my arms sort of sit farther forward on my body, and it's probably also because I slouch a lot like this, but I tend to need a little bit more room in the back and a little bit less room in the front. Also, I'm small busted, so that's another thing that I consider. So this is a yoke sweater, And so when it came time to separate the sleeves and the body, I just shifted the sleeves just a couple of stitches towards the front. So I had fewer stitches on the front than I did on the back. And I mean, we're not talking a lot. I think it was maybe 2 stitches, maybe 2 or 3 stitches on each sleeve. So the sleeves are situated a little bit further forward on the yoke. And that just gives me a nicer fit in the back, really, because I just tend to need a lot of room in the back. The other modification that I made is to the sleeves. In the pattern, the cable that comes down the shoulder continues all the way down the sleeve. And I changed that for a few reasons. One is preference. For me, the yoke is the star, and I didn't want to have something on the sleeve sort of distracting from the yoke. The cable pattern isn't just a little tiny thing, it's actually like a longer cable chart. And so if I had just started knitting that chart and gotten to the point where I needed to stop the sleeve, it would have cut the chart off in the middle of the chart and could have been an odd sort of connection going into the cuff. I'm fairly sure the designer has now offered different sleeve lengths, like ways for you to edit that chart so that you can get the correct sleeve length for your own body. But at that point in the test knit and with other stuff I had going on, I was like, I don't want to screw around with the chart. I just want a plain sleeve. So I just continued the moss stitch, double moss stitch? I can never remember which is which. I just continued the body pattern all the way down the sleeve, and I didn't make any decreases. So the sleeve as written in the pattern, I believe, is more of a normal shaped sleeve where you do regular decreases down the arm. And I did not decrease at all. So I knit the sleeve straight to this point here. And then I did a couple of rounds of decreases right at this point where it joins with the cuff. And then I just did a 2x2 cuff, which is what was written. So it has a little bit of a blousey effect, which I like. Now that this has been blocked, you can really see the beautiful detail in the yoke. And you can really see where the sweater got its name from. Here's all the lattices crossing and the traveling cables, which are written extremely clearly in the pattern. I didn't have any trouble following that. And then in the center of each diamond, there's a different pattern. So we have some reverse stockinette here and here. This is the same as the body pattern here. And then we have stockinette with some bobbles, which is a nice touch, I think. So that is the blueberry pie sweater. The next finished garment that I want to talk to you about is the Yesteryear top by Mimi Alelis. This is from an issue of Interweave Crochet. So every now and then I get an email that Interweave is having a sale on their magazines online. You can buy digital copies for extremely low prices. And so at one point in the past, I had just gone ham on this sale and bought like a ton of Interweave Crochet and a ton of Interweave Knits digital version. So I have all of those like saved to a thumb drive on my computer. I had been eyeing this pattern for some time. I think I had talked about I swatched for this at some point in the past. I had done a swatch and showed it on one of the episodes. This is a crochet top, and one of my goals for this year was to make another crochet garment because I just wanted to sort of keep my skills up. I'm not a great crocheter. I didn't grow up crocheting. I've sort of taught myself how to do it as an adult. And I don't want to lose those skills since they're still relatively new for me. I think this ended up being really cute. I had a moment in the middle of it where I had to pull out a section, and I'm not kidding, 5 different times to get the right fit on my body. And so let me talk you through what this process was. First of all, I used Knit Picks crochet thread. It's their Curio, I think it's number 10 thread in black. It looks like this. And it's extremely thin. I mean, it's crochet thread. I know crocheters out there are like, duh, but for me, I have never knitted with anything this thin or really worked with anything this thin in terms of, making a garment. I used a 2.25 millimeter crochet hook, which also felt a little bit tiny for me at the time, but it was what got me gauged, so that's what I used. And I had started this and I had gotten about 1.5 inches into the yoke or so before I had the accident with my wrist. So this sat for quite a while, not doing anything. And then I had gotten to the point in my PT where it was going to be sort of a good thing for me to start moving my wrist a little bit. And I had asked if I could do crochet because what I had found. You know, of course, I was like trying to test out and see whether I could knit and whether I could use any of the styles that I know how to do. And all of them were very quickly aggravating my wrist, like almost instantly. And so my PT had agreed, like, try 5 minutes of crochet, but don't go crazy. It turns out that I could crochet with relatively little discomfort. So I ended up working on this through a lot of the recovery from my ordeal. The pattern is both written and charted, and my instinct is to use the written pattern because I think that's how I started learning knitting patterns. Like, I was always reading the written version instead of the chart. It took me a little while to learn how to read charts, you know, like 10 years ago when they started becoming really popular in patterns. So it's not really instinctual for me to go to the chart first when I'm doing a crochet pattern, but I really like the way that crochet patterns, like, once I have sort of wrapped my head around the written instructions and then I go to the chart, I can easily see what I'm supposed to be doing. It just takes me a minute at first to wrap my head around what I'm supposed to be doing. And the chart for this pattern is very good, I found. There were some mistakes in the written instructions, but it was not so bad that I couldn't figure out what to do as a relative beginner, so I wouldn't be too worried about that in the yoke section at all. Like, you can very clearly see these leaf shapes and what it is you're supposed to be doing. Like, that becomes pretty clear right away, I found. So the couple of times that there was a mistake in the written instructions, it was easy for me to identify and just sort of ignore it and keep going in that round until I got around to the next one. This is a top-down garment, and so you start off by doing this little picot edge here, which I really liked. It's really cute on, it's a nice detail, and then you join in the round and you start going down. And I wanted to do a top-down garment just so I could try it on as I went and, you know, blah, blah, blah. All the reasons that people like doing top-down knitting garments. Same for crochet. I made the second size. And so by the time I had gotten to the end of the yoke here, then you're supposed to stop and work a couple of rows flat. So to get enough depth to end up connecting under your underarm eventually. And what I found, and this is typical for me and my body, is that there were not enough rows as written in the pattern to get anywhere close to my underarm. Like, I at first was like, well, let me try it. You know, I got down, I think it recommended doing 6 rows of flat double crochet by that point. So after you stop the pattern on the yoke, you start just doing double crochet. And so you can sort of see when you start crocheting flat, some people might not like this. The stitches end up sort of facing one way and the other. You can see they're like little soldiers lined up and they're all facing opposite directions here. And then when you get down past the flat crochet point, I hope I haven't been saying knitting this whole time. Once you get past the flat crochet part, you can see that they're all sort of facing the same way once again. And that doesn't bother me, but it might bother some. So at any rate, I at first went according to pattern and I did my, let's say, 6 rows of flat double crochet. And then when you join in the round at the underarm, you chain a certain number of stitches to sort of get around this distance here and connect the 2 sides of the yoke, front and back. It was not going to be a good situation. Like, it was so tight on my underarm that I immediately knew that was not the right answer. So I ripped that back just to where I was working flat. And then I had the idea that maybe I would add more rows in the back, like short row style, but not actually doing short rows, just working more rows in the back to lower the front neckline, because the way the pattern is written, the front and the back are the same. You do the same number of rows below the yoke. So I thought it might be nice to have the back raised up a little bit. So I actually ended up doing 6 additional rows on the front and 10 additional rows on the back from what was recommended to get to the point under my arm, or I felt like it wasn't going to be cutting off my armpit or like going up into my armpit. And you can see from these modeled shots that it's not low enough to show my bra, but low enough to be comfortable. Like, this is something that I'm going to be wearing on a super hot day, so I don't want anything really close fitting or touching my body on a day where I'm going to wear something like this, you know. Getting to that place where I knew that the 6 additional rows on the front and 10 additional rows on the back were what I needed, was what I had to rip out so many different times. I just kept thinking, like, there's no way this, I'll do 2 additional rows and that'll fit. Nope. Get to that point, try it on. And at that point, there were so many stitches on the round that one round was taking a significant amount of time. And so I had started to get a little bit impatient that I had to rip it out so many times. And this was the only project I could work on. And it's black cotton yarn. And, I had a dark moment with this one for about 2 days. But when I finally got to the point where I had worked out that the sizing was going to be okay, and by that point I wasn't doing it again anyway, so I was like, we're just going with this. The rest of it sort of flew by. I mean, there were a lot of stitches per round going on, but it was easy to sort of go on autopilot and just think about the movements, and it was actually sort of a nice experience once I got past the drama of the underarm. Might be a little hard to tell, but the shape is A-line actually, so it is cropped, and I may have cropped this a little bit more than the pattern recommends. I honestly don't remember, but at this point I was like, I need to stop. And so you can tell it's got a little bit of a bell shape, and the way that this happens is, so you're going along, I don't think this is giving too much away, you're going along here and you're doing sets of 4 double crochet with a chain in between them. Once the shaping starts to happen, you continue doing those sets of 4 double crochet, but you just add another chain in between them. And it makes the holes in between these columns of double crochets look a little bit bigger. The holes are a little bit bigger, but that is what gives it the bell shape. And you can sort of see it starts right here. So here's the 1 chain in between the groups, and here's where the 2 chains start. And it's subtle, but it's a really nice way of doing the shaping, I think. And then the bottom has a little bit of a picot style edging as well, which I really liked. Gets reminiscent of the detail at the neck. I think it's cute. Of course, I finished it right around the time where it's starting to get colder around here, and so this one I'm going to save until next summer. I'm happy to report that I didn't actually have too much of a problem working with the black yarn. I think this cotton is really shiny. Yeah, you can tell. It's really shiny, and so that sort of actually made it easier to see. Of course, black, I have a white cat, so every single hair is just beaming. Yeah, it's crochet thread. I'm not sure how much there is to report about crochet thread because I don't have a whole lot of experience with other brands, but Knit Picks, it's affordable, it's accessible if you're in the States, and I would use it again if I was going to crochet with thread, which I might do. It wasn't a bad experience, but it's not like something that I feel like I crave doing again, you know what I mean? So that is the Yesteryear top. And my third finished object is the Radvent throw by Ambah O'Brien. So some of you might remember me talking about this much earlier in 2021. I had started this last year during December with a Stress Knits advent calendar that I had last year, and also just a couple of extra mini skeins I had. This pattern is written to be an advent, mini skein pattern, and I felt like it was going to be a little bit too small. So instead of the 24 squares for the blanket, I did 30, and I did 5 rows of 6. For this entire thing, I held together 1 strand of fingering weight, which was, each mini skein, and a lace weight strand of yak silk merino, I think, singles yarn. And I have been holding that together with everything for, it seems like years, because I have so much of it. And so that's this whole blanket. The gray of the lace weight sort of ties the whole thing together a little bit more. And I do generally like the color palette. I tried to lay the squares out in a sort of dark in one corner to light in the other corner. I think I like it, but honestly at the point where I was putting the squares together, I was like, I no longer care. I just want this thing to be done because I had been working on it for so long. The joining together of these squares, I did as recommended in the pattern, which was a crochet, like a single crochet join. I'm sorry, all of these terms are US crochet. I'm sure that UK crocheters have figured that out by now. I apologize. So all of the joins were done with a single crochet. And I really enjoy that method of joining the squares because it was easy to see where to match them up and also easy to get through. But the thing I don't love about it is that crochet, sort of just by its nature, is a tighter, more firm stitch than a knitted stitch. And so using a crochet join to join a whole bunch of knitted stitches, the blanket at the edges sort of has like a little scallop effect that is not intentional. And I don't love that, but it's not something that I'm going to correct at this point. And I also am not feeling compelled to ever knit a blanket again after this. I think I'm done knitting blankets. So you heard that here. We'll see if I ever do another one. The edging for this was also knit in the round, garter stitch in the round. So you had to go around and pick up stitches on all 4 edges of the blanket, and then you knit your garter stitch border and you miter the corners a little bit, which I thought was a nice effect. I'm glad this blanket is finally done. I like the finished object. I've used it a bunch on the couch in the evenings now that it's fall and the weather's getting a little bit cooler. And this blanket also, every single animal in the house loves this thing. So it's hard to keep them off of it. For works in progress, I have 1 that you have seen before, and I have 3 that you have not seen before. So let me show you the one that you are familiar with already. Last time I showed you where I was at on my Bohus sweater, which is the Red Edge by Alelis and Mannheimer Lunn. Since I last showed this to you, I have finished the back, I blocked the back and the front, I attached the 2 at the shoulders, which was done using a 3-needle bind off, and I knitted the neckline. And here is what this looks like now. I'm really happy with how the color work blocked out, and you can see all of my ends. Oh my god. You can see how nicely all of this color work blocked out, and I'm just really happy with the evenness of all of these little patterns, which were not particularly even in my knitting before blocking. Part of the reason this blocked out so nicely is because I am using Jamieson's Shetland Spindrift, which is meant for doing color work. It just tends to really, like the nature of that yarn tends to really create a nice solid fabric once it's blocked, and it's doing exactly what I expected it to do here. The neckline hasn't been blocked yet, so it's a little bit, the ribbing is a little bit wonky, but I think that will block out just fine. I was a little bit worried that it's going to flare a little bit. So after I had attached the shoulders together using the 3-needle bind off that you can see there, I picked up stitches in the round around the neck and then knit the ribbing up. And so I think my cast off, I was trying to be really loose with the cast off because it felt like it was going to pull in a unpleasant way. Now I'm wondering if it's a little too loose, but we'll just block it and see what happens. I have not sewn any side seams yet. And so I was trying to figure out what to do with the sleeves. The sleeves are done in this same beige color as the main body. I had been toying with the idea of knitting them top down versus bottom up. The pattern has them written bottom up. So you start with the cuff, you do your ribbing, and then you knit them bottom up. So I haven't worked on this since I hurt my wrist. But from what I remember, I think I just decided to go with the sleeves as written in the pattern and just do them that way because I liked the sort of old school vibe of the sweater in the photos. However, the shaping on the sleeves is just very odd once I got into it. And of course, I started knitting these 2 at a time. So I have 2 different balls of yarn attached to the 2 different sleeves on my needle, and I've just been knitting them back and forth, which is a good thing to do if you get second sleeve syndrome, but it's not a good thing to do if you decide that you don't like the sleeve shaping and you've knitted essentially an entire sleeve because you have knitted 2 half sleeves. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I thought I had more done on these. I guess I stopped too early. So here are my 2 sleeves on my needle. They look relatively okay here, so I'm knitting them flat, and then they would eventually be, you know, joined and seamed like a normal seamed sleeve. But as I was knitting along, so here are some markers which I was using to keep track of how many increases I had done just because I was being lazy and didn't want to count my stitches. And you can see how often there's an increase happening, right? It's like I think it's every fourth row. And what this sort of shaping is doing, so after you knit your 3 inches of ribbing and you start this shaping, with this rate of increase, what it's doing is creating like a big triangle, and this shaping continues all the way up the arm. And so when I realized this, which was really, I should have realized this a long time before this point, but when I realized this, like this angle here is just going to keep going up and up and up and up. And so by the time this gets to the length that I actually need to cover my arm, the top of that sleeve is going to be like 5 feet wide, right? I mean, not literally, probably, but it's going to be so wide that at that point, when you put it together to sew it, there's going to be so much fabric, especially at the underarm, because these increases are happening at the underarm seam. There's just going to be so much friggin' fabric there that to fit that in a graceful way into an armhole, which is sort of a, well, it's going to be, let's see, how can I show this to you? So the armhole is I don't even know what I would call this. It's sort of a modified drop shoulder because the shoulder is quite wide, but there is a little bit of an element of what I would consider a set-in sleeve shape here. It's, I don't know, it's so minor. Like there's, it's a combination between a set-in sleeve and a little bit of a relaxed shoulder. So if you were to have that big triangular piece coming into here with all of these increases happening along the underarm, when you stretch your arm out like this, it would look fine. But when you put your arm down by your side, there's going to be a ton of fabric bunching up in your armpit, which of course, if I had thought this through as I was going along making these sleeves, that is actually exactly what's happening in the photos in the book. Like, look at all of this. That's not cute. And for some reason I wasn't fixating on that, right? I was like, oh, look at how cool. And, you know, I don't know. I've been really feeling the 80s and 90s of my childhood, like the very early 90s style of this book. Even though these are patterns from the 30s through the 60s. But when they were reworked for this book, I suspect that they might have been modernized for the time this book came out, which was 1995. So I don't know, I've been sort of nostalgic for this style for some reason lately, and I was just looking at like, oh, how cool and relaxed fit this looks, but I didn't notice what's going on here at the underarm, which is upsetting. So I stopped the sleeves because I needed to think about what I was going to do. The point where the sleeves are now, I think, is going to end up being an okay width. Like, I think if I show it to you on my arm, you know, it's not bad. Getting a little bit blousey, like it's bigger. It will be bigger once it's seamed than the sweater that I have on in terms of the volume around the arm. But I don't hate that because I like these little bit of a blousey sleeve. But I am having trouble visualizing how to shape this to get it to fit into that sort of very gentle J shape of the armhole. So I think what I'm going to do is stop these but save them and then go back to my original plan of picking up stitches around the armhole at the top and knitting down, and then I will graft the bottoms of the sleeves that I already have onto the top down knitted sleeve. So I have a couple of considerations with this. I'm going to have to knit the sleeves flat, so that's not really a problem, but I will basically pick up stitches all along this length here, and then I'll do some short rows at the top. And so this is a technique that I learned from Elizabeth Doherty's book. I think it's called Top Down Sweater Construction or something. I'll put it down here. She explains really clearly in the book how to do this. But basically you pick up stitches and then you shape the sleeve cap by doing some short rows here, and you essentially keep going until you get to the point where you want to start knitting in the round. And it sort of lets the sleeve just sort of grow gradually off the top and start sloping down the way you need it to actually fit your arm and not have a whole bunch of excess fabric at the underarm. And then you get to a point where you start knitting in the round, and then you just knit your sleeve as normal. So for me, when I get to that point, I'm going to be knitting flat. So I will keep knitting flat. And then I will just have to make sure that at the point where I need to join my sleeves that I've already knit, the sleeve bottoms onto the sleeve tops, I'll need to make sure that I have the right amount of stitches there, which I anticipate I'll need to increase to get to the point where I have no idea how many stitches I have per sleeve here, but I might have to increase, like, to create a sort of bell sleeve as I'm knitting down in order to match up with this stitch count here. I'm gonna wing it when it comes to that. I'm basically just gonna pick up the stitches and work the sleeve cap so that I know that I've done that and it is gonna fit my upper body. And then at that point, I'll see, okay, how many stitches do I have on my needles? How many are on each of these sleeves? What's the difference there? What's the rate of increase or decrease that I need to do over X distance to get to the point where I can graft these together seamlessly? I hope that was clear. Sounds good when I say it, right? So that is something that I am sort of mentally gearing up for doing. I don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but I feel like it's one of those things where once I do it, like once I actually pick up those stitches at the shoulder and just start doing it, it will sort of snowball and hopefully be a good thing. And I'll be able to get this done. After the sleeves are joined together, then I'll join the sleeve seam and the side seam in one go, which is sort of similar to how you might construct a sewn garment a lot of the time. So that is the plan for the red edge. My next whip is one that I talked about wanting to start a few months ago. It is the Fleuriste by Sari Nordlund. And I had swatched for this a long time ago and then sort of set the swatch aside. Like, the swatch worked out, but I wasn't quite ready to start the garment. And this is another one that I had started before my instant. So I had done the swatch, and this is some Mouret, so natural brown Foxhill Farm Cormo fingering weight yarn. This is just beautiful. It's a nice farm yarn. It has a really, I wouldn't call it soft exactly, but it's just got a really nice texture. It's not scratchy, but it's not soft. It just sort of is. And the color is just this beautiful, natural, light brown, but it's almost like a silvery brown. Seems odd to describe a brown that way, but it is very silvery. So I had this swatch up on my design board for a long time, and I finally had started the sweater, and it flew by because it was so much fun. This cardigan is worked bottom up, and the button band is knit at the same time as the rest of the garment. And I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to like that and how that turns out, but I actually can't recall having done this before. I'm sure that I have, but not for a long time. So I am done with the body, and here it is. This is not blocked, and I am interested to show it to you between being unblocked and being blocked, because this lace panel is absolutely lovely. I love just the nature of this lace. It's got a lot of sort of 1/1 crossing twisting stitches, and it looks really complex, but it's actually really easy to follow once you understand what's going on in the chart. So this is worked bottom up in one piece, and once you get to the underarm, you stop and you knit the fronts flat and you knit the back flat. You attach at the shoulder with a 3-needle bind off, and I have already picked up and done the collar. So here's what I mean when I say that the button band is knit at the same time. I did not pick this up and knit it afterwards. It's incorporated into the body as you're knitting it. So this is basically a little inch wide band of ribbing. And I didn't love the process of doing this because it makes it hard to know exactly where to place your buttonholes unless you plan very far ahead. So that was sort of the first thing I didn't love, was the stressing about where to put the buttonholes. And I did stress about it, and I did figure out where to put them, but I didn't love that. I like being able to decide where I'm going to put the buttonholes later on in the way that you can do when you pick up stitches here and knit your button band this way. The other thing that makes me a little wary of these ribbed button bands is that once there's a button in here and it's pulling, you know, when you have the garment on your body and the cardigan fronts are pulling against each other because your body's in there, I am worried that this is going to pull in an unpleasant way and basically look like that. You know, even if the garment fits me with enough ease that it's not actually tight, the stretchiness of this button band might make it look like it's too tight because the buttons are pulling, you know. This might not actually end up being a problem. I am making the size 3. I think it's like 39.5 inches at the bust for my 35-inch actual bust, but that might not matter. Like if it does look like it's pulling, I have been trying to think of ways that I might reinforce that. And it's not going to be pulling the side that the buttons are attached to. It's going to be pulling the buttonhole side. So it's not something that I can necessarily just like sew a ribbon down to reinforce it easily in the same way I would for reinforcing a regular button band, the side that the buttons are actually attached to. But what I might do, if this turns out to be a problem, I'm really getting ahead of myself here and I should just chill until I know whether this is a problem or not. But I am thinking that what I might be able to do is on the back side of this buttonhole band is attach a ribbon, but I'm going to have to make buttonholes in that ribbon so that the buttons can pass through. So that's going to be a fun experiment if we get to that point, but that's my current plan if the buttonhole side ends up pulling in a way that I'm not satisfied with. So you can see that the lace is pulling in quite a lot, and I'm actually going to try this on so we can see how it fits right now. Okay, so it's not too bad, but this lace is definitely pulling in a lot, and this is supposed to be a drop shoulder garment, so you can see it's a little bit of a drop shoulder. But one thing that I find interesting about this pattern is that it's almost as if it's not meant to actually button up here, because this is going to be just like really cutting my neck off, unless this lace really opens up. But even then, like all of the modeled photos have the first button maybe here and the top is open. So that's sort of interesting, actually. I don't know if that's intentional that it's not supposed to button all the way up, but at any rate, am not going to be buttoning this all the way up, so whatever. But I'm interested to see how much this will open up. I don't ordinarily like blocking this nice textured lace and cable type of stuff. I don't like blocking the crap out of it because I like the textural element that it has when it's not super hard blocked, but I might not have a choice to get this to really fit in a way I'm happy with. So you can see I have definitely enough ease in the actual garment. This is fitting me, but it's not super tight, but I do suspect that this buttonhole side might pull a little bit, but we'll just have to see. So I'm going to block this now and we'll see if that changes the fit in a significant way. Another reason I want to block this now is so that I know exactly how long I have to knit my sleeves, because the sleeves are bottom up and then they will attach into this hole, which is, I don't think there was any underarm shaping here at all. I think this is a true drop shoulder where there was no shaping here and it's just like the sleeve fits right into this hole. This is an issue that we have talked about on this podcast before, where if you don't block, if you have a bottom-up sleeve situation, a really top-down sleeve situation too, and you have something going on at the yoke that you know is going to block out a little bit, any movement in this area in terms of your blocking will affect the length of your sleeve. So if I didn't block this and I knitted my sleeves to the length that I needed to fit into this with the way it's fitting on my body with the lace all scrunched up. When I eventually block it and this stretches out, then my sleeve is going to be too long. That's something that I've just gotten used to over the years, is like this mid-project blocking. And I actually really like mid-project blocking now. Like if I am at a point where I'm not quite sure about how something is going to look or fit or whatever, I will stop at that point and block it. Like I did that with the Yesteryear top. I forgot to mention that with the crochet top. I blocked the yoke before I did any of the flat rows below the yoke, because that yoke was so scrunched up from being worked on and, you know, not blocked. And especially cotton will really lay in a different way once it's been blocked. So I blocked that mid-project a couple times actually. And when I had finally thought that I had gotten the shaping right, I crocheted about another inch, and then I blocked it again just to make sure that that was going to fit. And I don't find that it takes too much time out of working on the project, especially not in the summer. You know, things dry quickly in the summer, so it's sort of less of a concern. But if you're ever worried about fit and how blocking is going to affect something, just stop and block it mid-project. It's fine. My next whip is another one that I haven't worked on in a number of months, but I am so excited about it and I can't wait to start working on it again. This is the Oak Cardigan by Marie Wallin, and it is in one of her latest publications. I think she's come out with a couple since this book came out, but it's one of the more recent ones called Wildwood. This is what the cover looks like. This is the one that I'm making. I think we have talked about this before, but I'm not quite remembering. I've been talking about this to myself in my head for so long that I feel like we've discussed it, but maybe we haven't. Here's another photo. So you can see it is, so it's written to be knit in pieces, and it's an all over colorwork cardigan, and it has these sort of angled fronts, which is a cardigan shape that I really like. This open front that are sort of angled like that, I find to be really wearable and also flattering on my body. I got a selection of her yarn, British Breeds, which is milled by John Arbin. And I just got the same color palette. I was not trying to be imaginative in any way. I got the same yarn as called for in this book. I had to make a substitution with some Jamieson and Smith for the natural color because I had ordered this yarn from the Woolly Thistle and they didn't have the like bone color or whatever it was. I think it's the colorway is raw that I was missing. So I ended up subbing with some Jamieson and Smith in one of the natural colorways. This is what the British Breeds looks like. It is really lovely. All of the colors are heathered like this, which is my absolute favorite. This sweater is meant to be knit flat, and I just don't, despite having knitted colorwork flat for the red edge, I don't necessarily want to do an all over colorwork sweater like that. And I had been toying with the idea of giving it a go and really getting used to knitting colorwork flat, but when it came around to starting it, I was like, you know, I just want to steek it. So that's what I'm doing. I'm converting the pattern to be knit in the round, and here is how far I got before I had to put it down. So I am actually almost to the underarm, and I think I might just have a couple of rows left before the underarm. And what I have done here is I basically am reading off of the front, both fronts and the back chart at the same time and just knitting it in the round. I added a side stitch. I'm like trying to remember even what I did. It's been that long since I picked this up, but I added a faux side seam. So there's like a purl stitch in here, which is maybe a little bit difficult to see. But that is what I have done for the sides. And you can see the pattern it's not continuous around. I had considered trying to figure out how to space out these motifs so that the pattern would be continuous through the side seam, but it was getting to be a little bit too much. Like all of these motifs have a different number of stitches across, and yet they all end up matching up with each other because of these little triangle motifs that connect them. And so it was just going to be too much for me mentally at the time to figure that out. And I just figured these side seams are going to be under my arm all the time, and I really should just chill. So that's that. And then the front has a steek, which I did, I think, a 7-stitch steek. Yes, 7 stitches. And you can see, so with the shape of the cardigan having those angled fronts, you start off from the bottom with your corrugated rib, which is a nice touch. And so I knit the corrugated rib flat. Then I joined in the round, started my steek, and you knit up to the point where those cardigan fronts start to slope. And then when you were knitting flat, you would do decreases to make that sloping shape as you're going up. But with the steek, you do those decreases, but you just do them on either side of the steek. And so you can see that the patterns start to sort of angle in towards the steek. And that's how you deal with the shaping when you are converting a pattern, a colorwork pattern, from flat to in the round. So it's going to look a little bit wonky until I cut the steek. And the tricky thing about doing that is that, as we all know, with steeking, there is no going back. So I have no worries about this working out. I'm fairly confident it's going to work out. And I'm really just enjoying the process. The yarn is beautiful. It smells really sheepy. I feel like I read this on John Arbon's website that he thinks it's because of the mix of sheep breeds. There's one of the reasons that the yarn has so much depth of color is that there is some Swartbliss sheep wool mixed in, and Swartbliss is dark colored. And so it sort of gives this really interesting depth to the yarn. But I feel like I had read on the John Arbon website that it's also the Swartbliss that gives it the really woolly smell. And it is, I mean, it's gorgeous. Like, if you really like that sheepy smell, this yarn is for you. And the colors are also beautiful. I cannot take credit for any of this color palette because it is just exactly as written in the pattern. And I'm really excited to keep working on this now that I took it out of the bag. I'm at the point where I have to insert the steeks at the armpit for the sleeve holes. And so what I'm going to do, depending on the way the pattern is written, I need to take another look at it, but I will probably just cast off that purl stitch at the underarm and then cast on another 7 stitches so that there will almost be a hole where that cast off stitch is for the underarm and where my new 7 stitches for the steek are. And then I will continue knitting in the round. So then at that point I'll have 2 steeks for the arms and 1 steek still going down the front. And then I'm not quite sure what I'll need to do at the neckline, but I'm sort of in this figure it out as I go phase, so I'm gonna go with that. My only real concern at this point is that I am a little worried that this bottom rib is just gonna curl forever. I hope that this blocks out. This would be a good place for me to like follow my own advice and stop and block, but I haven't because it doesn't matter. I'm not ripping all of this out if this corrugated rib ends up rolling. But what I will do is cut it off eventually if it keeps rolling forever. So I'm going to block this body before I steek it. Then I'll steek the thing. And then the steeking won't affect this rib anyway because I had knitted the rib flat. If it's still rolling at that point after it is blocked, I'll just cut it off right here and then put all those stitches back on the needle and knit a new ribbing down and do something to figure out how to keep this from rolling up so much. I think I had used a tighter needle there. I had used a smaller needle, and I'm not entirely sure that that was the right choice. But I'll deal with it if it's bothering me after it's blocked. So that's oak. Hopefully I will be able to get in some more work on this soon. I think I'm ready to start knitting two-handed color work again. I just need to wrap my head around where I am at in the pattern because it's been so many months since I've looked at it. And that brings me to the last WIP I'm going to talk about today, which is brand new. I have been working on it. Today is the 5th day, and I have actually gotten quite far because it's a worsted weight garment. So the story with this is that my mother-in-law has been wanting a sweater for some time, and she is an extremely knit-worthy person. So I have made her a sweater at some point in the past. My husband and I have been together for 10 years, I think. And I had knitted her a sweater sort of early when we were still dating, and she wears the crap out of knitted anything that I give her. She loves knitted socks. She's always sending me photos of like her feet and the 2 different knitted socks if I give her 2 pairs for Christmas. You know, like she's very, very knit worthy, and I enjoy making stuff for her. I also find it pretty easy to make things for her because we have the same shoe size, and we also generally fit in the same size sweaters. Like we're not shaped the same way, but knitted fabric is so flexible that because we're like approximately the same circumference and proportion in terms of our height especially, my sweaters will often end up fitting her. So like when she comes over here for dinner, she always comes into my room and sees what I'm working on here, and we'll like try sweaters on, and it's really cute. She was last over, I don't know, it was a couple months ago, and she was admiring some of my latest sweaters, and so I had sort of gotten the idea that I was going to make her another sweater this Christmas, but I hadn't identified exactly what it was going to be. I was thinking about making another one of the sweaters out of the Marie Wallin book. Those are all fingering weight. And so now that I'm finally able to knit again, I was like, I really want to make her one of those eventually, but I don't think my arm can handle doing it at this time, like with this timeline, because it's October 7th today, and so that doesn't leave a whole ton of time to do an entirely new fingering weight sweater before Christmas. Another thing that made me finally start really getting serious about doing this is that Selma of the Little Big Knits podcast just announced that she's having a Christmas make-along, and that was sort of what I needed to like push me over the edge to start the sweater now. So I had asked my mother-in-law, does she want a cardigan or a pullover, and what colors? And so she said cardigan and blues or purples. And so I was like, great, that I can do. So I was looking around for what yarn I wanted to use for it. And I was initially thinking colorwork, and I had gotten really hung up on like trying to find the right pattern, but I was looking for something more like worsted weight and something that would suit her, and I just wasn't finding exactly the right pattern. And so I had to sort of shift my thinking. And I have had this yarn that I've really wanted to use for 10 years. I got this yarn I got it in 2010. So I've had it for 11 years. And I have been looking for something to use it for the whole time, honestly. But I had bought this yarn before I really had internalized what colors not only look good on me, but what colors I gravitate towards. And so I really love this color, but it's not the best color on me, I don't think. Like I don't tend to reach for things that are jewel toned in my wardrobe. And so although I love this color, I didn't think, like I had never used it for myself because I didn't think that I would reach for that sweater. But so this yarn is some Cascade 220. It's non-superwash, and this is the Mallard colorway. This is coming up a lot more cobalt on the screen than it is in real life. It's like very, I don't know, it's blue and purple and a little bit teal. It's a beautiful color, and I had decided that I wanted to use this yarn. When Susan said blue, I was like, okay, she looks great in jewel tones. And I was like, yes, I can finally use that yarn, because I also do like knitting with this stuff. It's just a really sort of comforting yarn to knit with. Like I really grew up knitting with this type of yarn, and I was looking forward to using it. So then started the pattern search, and I am very familiar with what is available on Ravelry, but for some reason it still just took me a long time to pick out the pattern, because I think I was still, in my mind fixated on the color work thing. And I had tried to put this color together with other things from my stash, and it was all just not doing this original blue justice. So I decided, okay, we're just gonna go with one color and maybe do something with some texture. And I had really enjoyed making the Fleuriste, the lace at the top of the Fleuriste. And I was like, I want to find something similar to that, because I think that would be, it's a really beautiful texture. It will show up in this yarn. You know, this is dark, but it's not so dark that it won't show a nice texture. So I ended up choosing the Recoleta cardigan by Joji Locatelli. This is one that I've had in my favorites for a long time, and I just had never made it. I don't make a whole lot of worsted weight garments, but I think that might change soon because I'm really enjoying this. And I mean, how fast it's going also is sort of a nice change because I have all of these fingering weight projects and they do take a long time. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know, sometimes you want like a nice comforting sweater to wear at home and be very cozy, and a fingering weight sweater is not necessarily always that. But anyway, this cardigan has a really interesting construction. I have made other cardigans like this before. They might have been Joji Locatelli patterns too, actually. You cast on provisionally at the back of the neck and you knit across one way. I think you knit the right back neck first. Then you go back, pick up your provisional cast on, put those stitches on your needle and knit the other way. So you have the back of your neck and the lace pattern is mirrored, which is a really nice effect. And then at that point, and this I don't remember doing before for other sweaters, but you almost do like a garter tab cast on style effect where you have this small rectangle that you have knitted for the back of the neck and you pick up stitches along the back. And at that point, then you have your collar and you have some stitches for the rest of the body that's going to be growing over your shoulders. Then you place some markers and you actually start doing some increases for a raglan. So you have your collar, you have the front, and then you start doing your increases for the front and back of the sleeve. And so the back and the sleeve and the front actually also grow through those raglan increases. And the lace pattern that's on the collar is similar lace to what is on the back portion. So it's also like an interesting knit. You're always doing something. So here is where I have gotten so far. And this is it. So just to give you an idea of like what this actually is that I'm showing you. So this long pattern section at the front is the collar that goes around the back of the neck and then drapes down the front. And then here, this lace panel here is the back. And then the sleeves and the rest of the front are plain. So how these raglan increases, this is the sleeve right here. And these raglan increases are growing out of a point on that garter tab cast on style situation that you have after you do the first part of the neck. And so this lace is beautiful. It looks like cables, but it's not. These are actually just left and right leaning decreases. And the texture of this is just incredible. I really am pumped about how this is going. Now, as far as the size that I chose, that is the thing that's giving me a little bit of a pause, because the original pattern suggests choosing a size with little to no ease, or even some negative ease. And that, especially when I'm making a gift, I don't love the idea of doing something with zero ease. I also don't love knitting things or wearing things with zero ease, so I understand that it might be beneficial for a design where the back is lace, especially if you're wearing this with zero ease. It's really going to pull that lace apart and really show all of the holes, and it's going to, you know, I understand the logic there, but there's just something about wearing a garment with zero ease that puts me off a little bit. My mother-in-law is approximately the same size as me, so 35, 36 inch bust probably. And I am doing the 39 inch size. I am just, now that I'm at this point, so I have this on a super long cable and I had sort of tried it on earlier and stood in the mirror, and I just, like, I think that this is a pretty good proportion for the back and the sleeve. Like, I think this is going to end up being okay. But the thing that I'm a little bit worried about is that the fronts are going to be too big. Like this is the entire front. And you can see like it's coming really far across my chest. And I know like if I were wearing this, I would want these collar pieces to overlap. Part of this is her Christmas gift is my husband is going to pick out a little closure for this, like some sort of nice, you know, sterling silver closure that she can use to hold it together, because there are no closures on the cardigan. But I don't know. I hope that it doesn't end up being too big in the front. What I could do is with these raglan lines, oh my God, where is it? Okay. With these raglan lines here, I could stop increasing for the front. I am about an inch away from separating for the underarm here. I'm not quite sure. We'll see. I mean, it's only going to take me a couple hours to knit those last few rows. So I might just rip back if it turns out that the front is too big. I don't know. I'm at that point where it's like, I don't want to do the wrong thing, you know, but I probably will. And then I'll rip back. This is really my current whip that I'm working on. I am trying to get this to the point where I have the sleeves separated before October 15th, because I am going to Rhinebeck this year, which I am really excited about. I was going back and forth about going just because of obviously the whole situation. But where we live now is really close. I mean, we're 3.5 hours away by car. My husband's going with me for the first time, so he's never been to Rhinebeck. I've been, I think, 4 times before. Since I moved to Massachusetts, it's just easy to get there, so why not, you know? So we have a little Airbnb that is going to be, it's pretty cool looking. It's a tiny house, so we're going to hopefully have fun there. And we're going to check out a couple mills on our drive over for some research for some big plans coming up soon, which I hope to be able to tell you about in the next couple months. Yeah, we're going to spend Saturday at Rhinebeck, and then Sunday, I don't know if we're going to go back. We'll see. My husband doesn't really have a good concept of our community and how many of us there are. And I think it's going to be a little eye-opening for him. So we'll see if he's too overwhelmed to go back on Sunday. But Saturday, we'll probably spend the whole day there. So if you are going to Rhinebeck and you see me, please stop and say hi. Don't be shy. I'm a shy person. So I totally understand if you are, but I'm happy to meet all of you and say hi, and I think that would be wonderful. So I'm gearing up to take some footage of the trip and do a little Rhinebeck recap video. It's not my first instinct to like always have my camera out or always have my phone out. So I'm going to try to rope my husband into reminding me to do that sort of thing, so that I'm not just like absorbing those moments for myself. But I think it would be great to be able to share them with everybody and put together a little video to remember the time. Other than that, yeah, I have some other plans coming up, but I think I'll see you before those other plans will happen. So I'll tell you about them as we go. And yeah, that is that. This feels like it was a long one recording, but I'm also out of practice, so we'll see how it is in the editing. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.